Hi everybody, this is Cindy at the Rogue. We're very excited today to have Patrick Baliani here to give a talk about A View from the Bridge. It's strange to not have you all here in person, but it will be wonderful to have you hear what Patrick has to say. Patrick's one of my dearest friends. He teaches at the U of A. He's got a million credits to his resume, but mostly he's a wonderful person who thinks very deeply about things. And so we're thrilled to introduce you to Patrick Baliani as he talks about A View from the Bridge. One small thing I wanted to mention, even though you'll see both Patrick and Joe and me right now without a mask, during the production, all the actors will be masked, and we're taking good care of ourselves. Thank you.
All in all, to begin, I would say that Arthur Miller has been America's greatest moral playwright. Many critics, scholars, and audiences agree upon this. But what do we mean? I hope to begin to answer this question and provide some context for the Rogue Theatre production of his play, A View from the Bridge, and its particular place in the career of the playwright. And I will refer to a few of the many essays Miller wrote on theater during his life. 2,500 years ago, Sophocles wrote Antigone. Antigone is an ancient story that is always timely, the dramatization of an individual trapped between the imperatives of familial conscience and the mandates of social law. Arthur Miller's play, A View from the Bridge, enacts a similar theme, set in Brooklyn, USA, during the 50s. Longshoreman Eddie Carbone struggles with his obligations to family, to community, to his tortured self and subconscious. There is a narrator in the play, Alfieri, who some see as a kind of chorus figure, addressing the audience directly, at times commenting on the action, at times interacting with the characters.
I am inclined to notice the ruins in things, perhaps because I was born in Italy. But this is Red Hook. This is the slum that faces the bay on the seaward side of the Brooklyn Bridge. This is the gullet of New York swallowing the tonnage of the world. And now we are more civilized, more American. Now we settle for half, and I like it better. I no longer keep a pistol in my filing cabinet, and my practice is entirely unromantic.
Arthur Miller was born in 1915. He achieved worldwide lasting acclaim when in 1949 he accomplished one of the crowning achievements in theater, Death of a Salesman. What strikes me about Miller's next move, he would go on to write many other plays, screenplays, a novel, an autobiography, collections of essays, is he chose to adapt and direct a production of Henrik Ibsen's An Enemy of the People. In Miller's words, I decided to work on An Enemy of the People because I had a private wish to demonstrate that Ibsen is really pertinent today, that he is not old-fashioned, and implicitly that those who condemn him are themselves misleading our theater and our playwrights into a blind alley of senseless sensibility, triviality, and the inevitable waste of our dramatic talents. For it has become the fashion for plays to reduce the thickness of life to a fragmentile facsimile, to avoid portraying the complexities of life, the contradiction of character, the fascinating interplay of cause and effect that have long been part of the novel. And I wish to also buttress the idea that the dramatic writer has, and must again demonstrate, the right to entertain with his brains as well as his heart. It is necessary that the public understand again that the stage is the place for ideas, for philosophies, for the most intense discussion of man's fate. philosophies, contradiction of character, the interplay of cause and effect. Philosopher Alistair MacIntyre published After Virtue in 1981, a work that continues to be polemical. In it, he denounces much of modern ethical discourse for failing the test of rationality and not acknowledging that irrationality subsists in most of our moral discourse. MacIntyre singles out Aristotle's moral philosophy in his attempt to revive what is known as virtue ethics. Aristotelian virtue ethics, in short, emphasize virtue of mind, of character, of honesty and integrity, always focusing on the consequences of actions, how virtues are acquired, how they are applied, whether they are rooted in universal human nature or in the plurality of cultures. After Virtue is a wonderful title. It means both seeking virtue and living in the time after its demise. There was a debate then whether the collective good might spring from individual moral character. Imagine that. We are on solid Arthur Miller ground here. The playwright, again in response to Ibsen, has written, "Dramatic characters and the drama itself can never hope to attain a maximum degree of consciousness unless they contain a viable unveiling of the contrast between past and present and an awareness of the process by which the present has become what it is." And I say this finally because I take it as a truth that the end of drama is the creation of a higher consciousness and not merely a subjective attack upon the audience's nerves and feelings. What is precious in the Ibsen method is its insistence upon valid causation, and this cannot be dismissed as a wooden notion. Virtue ethics, for various reasons, took a beating throughout much of the 20th century. It's being cudgeled today. Somehow, in the past several decades, we have come to devalue character as the arbiter of political, social, even too often, dramatic action.
He was as good a man as he had to be in a life that was hard and even. He worked on the piers when there was work. He brought home his pay, and he lived. And toward 10 o'clock of that night, after they had eaten, the cousins came.
Among the opposing views to virtue ethics and what causes us to be and or become whole, if contradictory characters, we find situation ethics. Situation ethics are well described by Kwame Anthony Appiah, who writes the ethicist column for the New York Times. In an essay by Appiah that my students will read this semester, The Case Against Character, Appiah notes, "A lot of what people do is best explained not by traits of character, but by systematic human tendencies to respond to features of their situations that nobody previously thought to be crucial at all. Someone who is, say, reliably honest in one kind of situation will often be unreliably dishonest in another. They predict that Oskar Schindler was mercenary, arrogant, hypocritical, and calculating, sometimes, but not always, and that his courage and compassion could be elicited in some contexts, but not in others. The playful man, the serious man, the patient man, the angry man, same fellow, different circumstances." Here, though, I'd like to make a distinction between multifaceted characters, as we know them in good theater and in life, and more uniform characters, as we know them in bad theater and in life. Appiah proceeds, "Very often when we credit people with compassion as a character trait, we're wrong. A year ago, after taking my UA honors students to see the Rogue Theater production of Arthur Miller's The Crucible, we discussed Appiah's The Case Against Character. I asked 25 students a direct question. Which of you thinks the protagonist of The Crucible, John Proctor, is driven in his actions by the moral core of his character? Which of you thinks he is driven by situationist ethics? 4 out of 5 students said situationist ethics. 4 out of 5. John Proctor. A small group of us dissented. We live in a democracy. One of the beautiful things about Arthur Miller plays and A View from the Bridge is that you can argue his characters' actions either way, especially as they are caught in between so many conflicting imperatives. Wherever you stand on the virtue versus situation debate, in Miller after Miller play, the action reveals the causes that affect characters to act, and further, the consequences of their actions. As for the debates between the so-called consequentialists and non-consequentialist philosophers, that will have to wait till next semester. What is crucial in Miller's work is that recognizable causes have palpable effects that often lead to disastrous consequences. Miller writes, "In all my plays and books, I try to take settings and dramatic situations from life which involve real questions of right and wrong. Then I set out, rather implacably and in the most realistic situations I can find, the moral dilemma and try to point to a real, though hard, path out. I don't see how you can write anything decent without using the question of right and wrong as the basis." In A View from the Bridge, you will find an electrifying enactment of the hard path out. While the central character, Eddie, features most prominently in this regard, his wife, Beatrice, his niece, Catherine, and the lawyer, Alfieri, all traverse hard paths of their own.
Who can ever know what will be discovered? Eddie Carbone never expected to have a destiny. The man works, raises his family, goes bowling, eats, gets old, and then he dies. Now, as the weeks passed, there was a future. There was a trouble that would not go away.
One of my fondest recollections of going to a play in Tucson was when Arizona Theater Company revived Arthur Miller's The Price. It was many years ago now, and many years after its premiere on Broadway in 1968. But the revival of an Arthur Miller play, any of them, is an occasion. A new Arthur Miller play, he wrote more than 20, was always an event. The Price is very much an Arthur Miller play. Intimate, familial, realistic, depicting survival and the hope of emergence from loss, often, as in this case, amid the ravages of an economic downturn. Two brothers wage a sparring of memories as they attempt to recall and justify the turning points of their lives. Walter, a surgeon, and Victor, a policeman, reunite in order to sell their late father's furniture to Solomon, an elderly second-hand furniture salesman. There's a wonderful scene in the play when Solomon, originally played by Danny DeVito, says, "I figure you got maybe a few nice pieces here. Not that the rest can't be sold, but it'll take a year, maybe a year and a half, and that for me is a big bet. I don't know what to tell you. Look, with this furniture, the average person takes one look at this furniture. It makes them very nervous. I'm not bargaining with you, because he knows it's never going to break. You don't understand the psychology. If it wouldn't break, there's no more possibilities. Look here at this table. Bang it, kick it. You can't move it. A man sits down at such a table, he knows not only he's married, he's got to stay married." Terry Kinney, who directed the play on Broadway, remarked about The Price. "We as the audience are trying to be very careful to know why something is right from each character's point of view. It's how they witnessed and experienced the events, and they have been carrying these with them. It has changed them for better or worse. Now they have come back in order to testify to that. They went away feeling unloved, and what I think they discover instead is that they have a lot of love that could not find purchase.
I don't quite understand what I can do for you. Is there a question of law somewhere?
Arthur Miller embarked on writing A View from the Bridge shortly after The Crucible. Neither play achieved much acclaim. There has long been a bias in the United States against the so-called social play, as if all plays weren't that. True, it's a matter of degree, but only in America is one play considered social, another not. Arthur Miller always held his ground. The social drama, as I see it, is the mainstream, and the antisocial drama a bypass. I can no longer take with ultimate seriousness a drama of individual psychology written for its own sake, however full of insight and precise observation it may have. Time is moving. There is a world to make, a civilization to create that will move toward the only goal the humanistic democratic mind can ever accept with honor. It is a world in which the human being can live as a naturally political, naturally private, naturally engaged person. A world in which, once again, a true tragic victory may be scored. The Crucible, written about its own present and our past, was also ahead of its time. And consider, I read a recent statistic pre-COVID that for decades, a week did not go by without The Crucible being performed somewhere in the United States. Miller continues, in The Crucible, I had taken a step, I felt, toward a more self-aware drama. The Puritan not only felt, but constantly referred his feelings to concepts, to codes and ideas of social and ethical importance. Feeling, it seemed to me, had to be made of importance. The dramatic victory had to be more than a triumph over the audience's indifference. It must call up a concept of a new awareness. Then in A View from the Bridge, Miller continued in this vein. I wanted to write in a way that would call up the faculties of knowing as well as feeling. The jolt to us in the audience comes when we discover ourselves abutted to the ethical dimension. Miller's characters suffer, deny, acknowledge, refute, confound, and also at times ignore the moral implications of their actions as they attempt to claim their identity. We in the audience cannot. Perhaps more than any other Miller play, A View from the Bridge presents a swiftness of action, a directness with which events occur that makes their consequences the more stunning. I want my name, cries Eddie Carbone near the end of A View from the Bridge. And John Proctor near the close of Act 4 in The Crucible. Because it is my name, because I cannot have another in my life. I have given you my soul, leave me my name.
There are times when you want to spread an alarm, but nothing has happened. I knew then and there I could have finished the whole story that afternoon. It wasn't as though there was a mystery to unravel. I could see every step coming, step after step, like a dark figure walking down a hall toward a certain door. I knew where he was heading for. I knew where he was going to end. And I sat here many afternoons asking myself why, being an intelligent man, I was so powerless to stop it. I even went to a certain old lady in the neighborhood, a very wise old woman, and I told her, and she only nodded and said, "Pray for him."
I must tell you about the very moment I fell deeply in love with theater. I was in college, majoring in comparative literature, had seen my share of very good and not so good plays. The People's Theatre in Cambridge was performing a mixed cast, racial and generational, production of Death of a Salesman. A black friend of mine in his early 20s, we worked our way together through college at the local UPS, was playing Willie Loman. The actor's name, Jamie Williamson. There is a flashback late in the play at a hotel when a prostitute accosts Willie Loman. I recently reread the text. The stage direction says, "The woman laughs off stage." I remember the exact moment of that direction because while my attention was riveted on Willie's interaction with his sons, Biff and Hap, a bluish smoke streamed downward from my right across the stage toward Willie. There she was, in the wing, lurid, tempting, in a slit skirt, blowing the cigarette smoke shimmering through the blue stage light, drifting toward Willie. Don't do it, Willie. Willie, do not go with that woman. Willie. What does Willie do? He betrays his wife. He betrays his sons. He betrays himself. I will say he betrays us. We, being the empathetic creatures we are, love him all the more as we experience in the flesh what we have subconsciously felt from the first lines of the play. Our beloved Willie is bent on the trajectory of his self-destruction, physically palpable in blue, ephemeral smoke. The evanescence that hung so precariously in the moment and was gone the next clings to me still. The scene is a perfect example of what Tennessee Williams' definition of magic of theater, snatching the eternal from the desperately fleeting.
I soon saw that it was only a passion that had moved into his body like a stranger.
I believe that the common man is as apt a subject for tragedy in its highest sense as kings were, wrote Miller in 1949 in the most reprinted of his essays, Tragedy and the Common Man. He says, "On the face of it, this ought to be obvious in the light of modern psychiatry, which bases its analysis upon classific formulations such as Oedipus and Orestes' complexes, for instance, which were enacted by royal kings, but which apply to everyone in similar emotional situations. As a general rule, to which there may be exceptions unknown to me, I think the tragic feeling is evoked in us when we are in the presence of a character who is ready to lay down his life, if need be, to secure one thing, his sense of personal dignity. From Orestes to Hamlet, Medea to Macbeth, the underlying struggle is that of the individual attempting to gain his rightful position in society. And what's most telling to me is when Miller states, the possibility of victory must be present in tragedy."
Eddie, I want you to listen to me. You know, sometimes God mixes up the people. We all love somebody, the wife, the kids. Every man's got somebody that he loves, huh? But sometimes there's too much, you know? There's too much, and it goes where it mustn't. A man works hard, raises a child. Sometimes it's a niece, sometimes even a daughter. And he never realizes it, but through the years, there is too much love for the daughter. There is too much love for the niece. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Asked near the end of his life what his legacy would be, Miller replied, "Some good parts for actors. Alfieri, Eddie, Beatrice, and Catherine in A View from a Bridge are all such parts." Arthur Miller passed away in 2005. I remember feeling we'd lost a giant. He was 90 years old and had recently written the screenplay for The Crucible, starring Daniel Day-Lewis and Winona Ryder. In his memorial, Robert Brustein wrote that Miller has managed to keep his equilibrium and his equanimity on our crazy national roller coaster is a tribute to his endurance. Charles Isherwood said, "Arthur Miller was a true public intellectual. He leaves not just a legacy of powerful plays, but also a shining moral example, unmatched in American theater." Thank goodness for Arthur Miller, for his plays, his words. At a time when we so desperately need clarity of vision and voices such as his, we do well to heed his convictions. Miller has written, "The qualities in plays that shake us, however, derives from the underlying fear of being displaced, the disaster inherent in being torn away from our chosen image of what and who we are in this world. Among us today, this fear is strong, and perhaps stronger than it ever was. In fact, it is the common man who knows this fear best." And he continues, "Now, if it is true that tragedy is the consequence of a man's total compulsion to evaluate himself justly, his destruction in the attempt posits a wrong or an evil in his environment. And this is precisely the morality of tragedy and its lesson. The discovery of the moral law, which is what the enlightenment of tragedy consists of, is not the discovery of some abstract or metaphysical quantity. The tragic right is a condition of life, a condition in which the human personality is able to flower and realize itself. The wrong is the condition which suppresses man, perverts the flowing out of his love and creative instinct." Jacob Blake, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. Love that could not find purchase. Michael Brown, Andres Guardado, Matthew Shepard, Tatiana Jefferson. Torn from our chosen image of what and who we are in this world. Carlos Ingram Lopez, Brayla Stone, Eric Gardner, the women of Juarez murdered. We must point to a real, though hard, path out. Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, 43 kidnapped students from a teacher's college in Guerrero, the countless unnamed.
But the truth is holy. For I confess that something perversely pure calls to me from his memory. Not purely good, but himself purely. For he allowed himself to be wholly known, and for that I think I will love him more than all my sensible clients. And yet, it is better to settle for half. It must be. And so I mourn him, I admit it, with a certain alarm.
The possibility of victory must be there in tragedy. We are living in a tragic age. As in theater, so, we hope, in life and in death, the possibility of everyone's rightful position in society. Miller concluded his introduction to the revised edition of A View from the Bridge, placing the heightened psychological and sociological awareness upon our shoulders. He says, "It is more possible now to relate Eddie's actions to our own, and thus to understand ourselves a little better, not only as psychological, isolated entities, but as we connect to our fellows and our long past together." I like to predict rogue theater productions to come. I'm never right, but there's always a first time. Here goes. Death of a Salesman. If you were a live audience, there'd be a big round of approval just now. I'm going to let it ride. Best wishes to you and A View from the Bridge. Thank you very much.